For 6 seasons, Hogan's Heroes ran on CBS and made a prisoner of war camp feel like the most entertaining place on television. The comedy was sharp, the cast was extraordinary, and the show had more going on beneath the surface than most people sitting at home ever knew. Here are 25 small details you missed in Hogan's Heroes.
You will stand at attention when General von Himmelberg addresses you. Jawohl, Herr General!
Detail 25. The show was originally set in an American jail. The premise of Hogan's Heroes as audiences knew it. Allied prisoners running a covert operation from inside a German POW camp was not the original idea. Co-creator Albert S. Ruddy conceived the show as a modern-day comedy set inside an American jail, where inmates operated schemes right under the guards' noses. The essential dynamic was the same, but the setting had nothing to do with World War II. That changed when Ruddy learned another network was developing a series set in an Italian prison camp during the Second World War. He reworked the premise entirely, shifting the location to a German POW camp and building the show from there. The competing program was called Campo 44, and it did eventually reach air in 1967, only to be widely dismissed as an imitation of the very show that had actually changed its concept to avoid copying it.
You're wrong. You're quite wrong. I was being modest. Actually, I am considered...
Detail 24. Werner Klemperer had one non-negotiable condition. When Werner Klemperer auditioned for the role of Colonel Wilhelm Klink, he was not initially told the show was a comedy. He had been reading for what he assumed was a dramatic role. When the full nature of the project became clear, a sitcom built around bumbling Nazi officers, Klemperer agreed to take the part on one condition, which he made absolutely explicit. Klink could never succeed in anything. If any script was ever written in which Klink came out as the winner, Klemperer said he would leave the show. The producers agreed, and the condition held for all 6 seasons. Klink was never allowed to win. He was outmaneuvered every single week by Hogan, often without even knowing it had happened. Klemperer, who was born in Cologne and had fled Nazi Germany with his family in the 1930s before serving in the US Army during the war, was deeply aware of what he was playing. The condition was not a matter of ego. It was a matter of principle. He received 5 consecutive Emmy nominations for the role and won back-to-back in 1968 and 1969.
Herr Kommandant, are you satisfied?
Of course I'm satisfied. Let him away!
Detail 23. 4 of the major German characters were played by Jewish actors. It is one of the most striking casting facts in television history. The 4 primary German characters on Hogan's Heroes, Colonel Klink, Sergeant Schultz, General Burkhalter, and Major Hochstetter, were all played by Jewish actors: Werner Klemperer, John Banner, Leon Askin, and Howard Kane. 3 of them had personal histories with Nazism that went well beyond acting. Klemperer fled Germany with his family in the 1930s after his father, the renowned conductor Otto Klemperer, was forced out of his position in Berlin following the Nazi takeover. John Banner was an Austrian-born Jew who lost members of his family in the concentration camps. Leon Askin, who played the perpetually exasperated General Burkhalter, had been beaten by SA thugs following the Anschluss. The scar on his face visible throughout the show's entire run was real, a result of that beating. Howard Kane, whose birth name was Cohen, was an American. They were 4 Jewish men playing Nazi officers in a comedy, and doing so with the full awareness of what those uniforms had meant in real life.
Here, Newkirk, I want you to have this.
What is it?
My little black book. If you ever...
Detail 22. Robert Clary spent 31 months in Nazi concentration camps. Robert Clary played Corporal LeBeau, the compact, spirited Frenchman who cooked, bickered, and outwitted the Germans week after week. He wore long sleeves throughout every episode of the show. That was not a costume decision. It was because on his left forearm, tattooed there by the Nazis in 1942, was the number A5714. Clary had been deported from Paris at the age of 16, the youngest of 14 children in a Jewish family. He spent the next 31 months in Nazi concentration camps, first at Ottmuth, later at Buchenwald. His parents and 10 of his siblings were sent to Auschwitz, where they were killed. He was the only member of his immediate family taken to the camps who survived. He chose not to speak publicly about his wartime experience for 36 years, carrying it quietly through the entire run of Hogan's Heroes and well beyond. He finally broke his silence in 1980, provoked by the rise of Holocaust denial. He spent the following decade speaking in schools and universities, working with the Simon Wiesenthal Center, and later publishing his memoir, From the Holocaust to Hogan's Heroes, in 2001. He passed away on November 16, 2022, at the age of 96, the last surviving original cast member of the show.
Like a Boy Scout with a mustache, but you're all we've got.
Wouldn't like to.
Stay here. We can't fool Schultz, we can't fool anyone.
Detail 21. The Stalag 13 set was built on the same back lot as Mayberry. The exterior of Stalag 13 was constructed on a section of the Desilu Productions backlot known as 40 Acres, located in Culver City, California. That lot was shared with some of the most recognizable sets in 1960s television. The Mayberry set from The Andy Griffith Show was nearby. So was the set used for the Dick Van Dyke Show and That Girl. Ron Howard, who spent years riding his bicycle around the Desilu lot as a child while his father Rance worked in the industry, later recalled in his memoir being mesmerized by the sets at 40 Acres, describing them as holding what felt like stories and secrets. What those sets did not have, and what Stalag 13 also did not have, was a long afterlife as a preserved landmark. The lot was eventually cleared. Aerial photographs taken during the production years show the Stalag 13 barracks sitting just a short distance from what was recognizably the town square of Mayberry. Two entirely different fictional worlds built side by side in Culver City, photographed from above in the same frame. The outdoor Stalag 13 set stood only until 1974, 3 years after the show ended, when it was destroyed in circumstances that have their own separate story. Detail 20, the set was blown up for another film, not demolished. When Hogan's Heroes finished its run in 1971, the Stalag 13 set on the 40 Acres backlot was left standing. The production team had no immediate reason to tear it down, and doing so would have cost money. 3 years later, the producers of a low-budget exploitation film called Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS, approached the Hogan's Heroes team with a request. Could they use the set? Their script called for the camp to be blown up in the final scene. The Hogan's Heroes producers agreed. It meant they would not have to pay for demolition themselves. In 1974, the Stalag 13 set was destroyed by explosives during the filming of a film's final sequence, a set that had housed 6 seasons of one of the most beloved comedies in American television history went out in a controlled blast for a film that virtually no one remembers.
Hey, what to do?
No one, Schultz. It sticks in the warm weather.
It's freezing outside.
It's a pleasure to see you.
Detail 19. The cast had to wear winter coats in 90-degree heat. From the very beginning of production, the creative team made a deliberate decision. It would always be winter at Stalag 13. Snow would always be visible on the ground, frost on the windows, cold in the air. The reasons were practical. Keeping it permanently winter meant episodes could be aired in any order without continuity problems, and it made the prison setting feel bleaker and more authentic. The problem was that the exterior set was in Southern California, where it is rarely cold and often extremely hot. For most of the year, and especially during summer shoots, the cast was required to wear heavy coats, scarves, and winter gear, while temperatures on set climbed above 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Bob Crane, Werner Klemperer, John Banner, and the rest of the regular cast spent years acting cold when they were, by all accounts, sweltering.
Listen to him, Commandant. After all, he's called the turn every day this week. Right on the button.
Blind luck, he knows nothing.
Detail 18. Bob Crane's leather jacket originally belonged to Frank Sinatra. The A2 flying jacket that Bob Crane wore as Colonel Hogan throughout the series was not a prop sourced from a costume department. According to production records and IMDb trivia, the jacket had previously been worn by Frank Sinatra in the 1965 film Von Ryan's Express, which, by coincidence, was also a World War II film involving Allied prisoners. The same jacket later appeared on Greg Kinnear when he played Bob Crane in the 2002 biographical film Autofocus, completing an unusual chain of custody for a single piece of wardrobe.
All a part of life's rich pattern, Andrew.
That's right, forget it. Write her off.
Detail 17. Richard Dawson auditioned to play Hogan and couldn't sound American. Richard Dawson, who played the charming, card-sharp British corporal Peter Newkirk, had originally come in to read for the lead role of Colonel Hogan himself. He wanted the part. The problem was that Dawson, who had been born in Gosport, England, could not convincingly deliver an American accent at the audition. He was cast as Newkirk instead. His first instinct for the character was a Liverpudlian accent, the reasoning being that Beatlemania had made British accents fashionable with American audiences. The network overruled him, saying the accent was too difficult to understand. He switched to a Cockney dialect. Dawson reportedly got his quiet satisfaction when Beatlemania swept the United States shortly after the show premiered, having been told that the very accent he had proposed was incomprehensible. He later went on to host Family Feud for many years, becoming one of the most recognizable faces in American game show history.
Der Krieg ist zu Ende! Der Krieg ist zu Ende!
Detail 16. John Banner was originally considered for the role of Clink. John Banner, who became beloved as the wide-eyed, hand-wringing Sergeant Schultz, was not the first choice for that role. During pre-production, there were discussions about Banner potentially playing Colonel Clink, the Commandant, rather than the Sergeant of the Guard. The two roles were, in some respects, versions of the same archetype, the pompous, oblivious authority figure who never quite grasps what is happening around him. It was only as casting settled and the two actors were placed together that the roles were assigned as they eventually appeared on screen. Banner himself was an Austrian-born Jewish actor who had escaped Europe before the war. Like Klemperer and Askin, he carried a personal history with the regime he was now playing for laughs every week. He lost family members in the concentration camps. He brought to Schultz a quality that the character might easily have lacked, a genuine warmth underneath the buffoonery, a kind of basic decency that made the sergeant feel like someone who had not chosen the side he was on, and who was doing the absolute minimum required to survive his position without causing anyone serious harm. That quality was not in the writing. It was Banner putting something of himself into the role.
Clink, you meant the lady in the red dress, and she has been eating steadily for an hour and a half.
Detail 15. Leon Askin's facial scar was real. Leon Askin, who played the magnificently put-upon General Burkhalter, carried a scar on his face that viewers saw throughout the entire run of the show. It was not makeup. Shortly after the Anschluss, the annexation of Austria by Nazi Germany in March 1938, Askin was beaten by SA thugs before he was able to flee the country. The scar was a result of that attack. He made it to the United States and eventually served in the US military during the war. Playing an overbearing German general for 6 seasons of American television was, in its own way, a form of commentary that required no explanation.
Is the Red Cross going to mention his name to the Inspector General? You can bet your monocle they won't.
That's different.
Detail 14. The show's tagline came from a joke that Bob Crane rejected. In the lead-up to Hogan's Heroes premiere, comedian and satirist Stan Freberg was doing an interview with Bob Crane in the Sunday Times and proposed a promotional tagline for the new series. If you liked World War II, you'll love Hogan's Heroes. Crane did not find it funny. He told Freberg directly that no, they were not going to say that. That line became the show's actual tagline. It appeared in promotional materials and was used in the marketing of the series. Whether it reassured nervous viewers or alarmed them is hard to say, but it had the quality of the show itself. Willing to go somewhere that most people in the room weren't sure was entirely appropriate.
What's happening? What was that explosion?
Nothing, Colonel. Just another.
Detail 13. Werner Klemperer was not told. It was a comedy at the audition. Klemperer's condition about Klink never winning was already a remarkable part of the show's history, but there is a detail that came before it. The producers deliberately did not tell Klemperer the show was a comedy when he came in to audition. They were concerned, with reason, that a Jewish actor of Klemperer's sensibility and background would refuse to read for the part of a Nazi officer in a sitcom if he knew the full context. So they let him arrive at the audition, read the script, and discover for himself what he had walked into. He did not walk out. He stayed, asked for his condition, received it, and delivered one of the defining performances in American television comedy.
Impossible. Nobody escapes from here.
My guess is he went out hidden in one of the garbage trucks.
Detail 12. The Stalag 13 barrack set was reused for every barrack interior. For viewers who watched the show closely, something was slightly off every time the action moved from Hogan's barracks to a different part of the camp. The interior always looked exactly the same. That was because it was. The production used a single barracks interior set, rearranging the bunks, lockers, and furniture each time a scene was supposed to be taking place in a different building. The same front wall, the same basic layout, the same recycled furniture, shifted around just enough to suggest a different room. In Season 6, when a recreation hall was introduced as a new location, the same wall appeared again, this time with a bookcase inserted across the doorway. The same economy extended to other parts of the show's production. Extras who played German guards in one episode would sometimes appear as American prisoners in the next.
No man to spare for this kind of work.
Major, you've heard of Stalag 13.
Detail 11. There was never a Christmas episode. Hogan's Heroes ran for 168 episodes over 6 seasons, covering an enormous range of situations and storylines. What it never produced, in the entire course of its run, was an episode centered on Christmas. The holiday appeared twice, briefly, as a background element in 2 different episodes, but neither was built around it. Episode 6, The Prisoner's Prisoner, used an early Christmas as a framing device for one joke. Episode 126, The Big Picture, mentioned it in passing. The show went out of its way to avoid the kind of seasonal grounding that would have complicated its "we're always in winter" logic and limited when episodes could be rerun. A proper Christmas episode would have anchored the story to a specific time of year. The production team never made one.
What most drug ought to do it, sir.
We don't want to bring her down just yet. We'll wait until LeBeau sees the van approaching, then with one...
Detail 10. Palm trees were occasionally visible in the background. The show committed to its permanent winter setting with impressive consistency. Fake snow on the ground, frost on the windows, warm coats on every actor. What it could not do was move the 40 acres backlot out of Southern California. On a small number of occasions, if a viewer looked carefully at the background of an outdoor scene, the tips of palm trees were visible above the fence line. No amount of fake snow could fix a palm tree that was simply there, in Culver City, growing. The production team was aware of it and worked to frame shots accordingly, but the palms occasionally appeared anyway. For anyone who knew what they were looking at, it was a small and involuntary reminder that Stalag 13 was, at all times, exactly 11 miles from downtown Los Angeles.
Düsseldorf. Ah, go ahead. Swansea, danke.
Detail 9. The show was produced by Bing Crosby Productions. The company behind Hogan's Heroes was Bing Crosby Productions, the entertainment company owned by the legendary singer and entertainer Bing Crosby. Crosby himself was not involved in the day-to-day production, but his company financed and produced the series throughout its entire run. It was an unusual piece of pop culture geography. One of the most famous voices in American entertainment history, the man behind White Christmas and Swinging on a Star, had his name on the production title card of a show about a Nazi POW camp. The combination was genuinely surreal, and most viewers probably never thought about it at all. The creators of the show, Bernard Fine and Albert S. Ruddy, had a contentious history with the company. In 2012, an arbitration hearing was called to determine whether they had signed away the rights to any potential Hogan's Heroes film when they sold the television rights to Bing Crosby Productions. In 2013, Fine's estate and Ruddy successfully reclaimed the movie rights through that arbitration process. Ruddy, who had gone on to produce The Godfather in 1972, winning the Academy Award for Best Picture, had always been more interested in film than television, and the legal fight for the movie rights reflected that preference.
Why didn't we think of that? Yeah. Where can we,
Detail 8. The opening drum riff was played by Bob Crane himself. The theme music for Hogan's Heroes was composed by Jerry Fielding. Most people who watched the show remember the opening bars, that brisk, martial, slightly absurdist drum-heavy riff that launched every episode. What very few people knew was who was playing the drums on that recording. It was Bob Crane, the show's star. Crane had started out as a drummer and radio personality in Connecticut before his television career, and his musical ability was genuine. He recorded the opening drum riff for the theme, and it ran at the top of every single episode for 6 seasons. That same drum riff, incidentally, is identical to the one used in the 1962 film The Longest Day, another World War II production, predating the show by 3 years.
An officers' club in a ship comes out in the middle of a prison camp 60 miles from the North Sea.
Detail 7. Werner Klemperer met his second wife on the set. Werner Klemperer's third wife, the actress Louise Troy, was not someone he had known before the show. She was a guest actress who appeared in an episode during the production run, playing a character named Axis Annie. Klemperer met her on set, and they married in 1969 during the show's 5th season. Troy died of breast cancer in 1994, 6 years before Klemperer himself passed away in December 2000.
Funny, ain't it? In your own fatherland, by your own soldot.
Detail 6. The show was sued for copying Stalag 17. Hogan's Heroes was loosely inspired by the atmosphere and premise of the 1953 film Stalag 17, which had itself been adapted from a 1951 Broadway play. The playwrights who wrote that original work, Donald Bevan and Edmund Trzcinski, filed a lawsuit against Bing Crosby Productions for copyright infringement. The jury initially found in favor of the plaintiffs. A federal judge then overruled the jury, finding that the two works had a striking difference in dramatic mood. The lawsuit was unsuccessful, and Hogan's Heroes continued without legal interruption.
Have your records. Is this party necessary, or is this a matter of honor?
Oh, honor, don't be silly.
Detail 5, a Mel Gibson film adaptation. Almost happened in the late 1990s, Hogan's Heroes came closer to becoming a feature film than most people know. In June 1998, producer Jim Burke secured the rights to the show from Reiser Entertainment, which held the Bing Crosby Productions library, and brought them to Paramount Pictures, a studio that had recently had success adapting classic television properties with The Addams Family and The Brady Bunch movie. By September of that year, Mel Gibson's production company, Icon Productions, had entered talks with Paramount to develop and co-finance the project, with Gibson himself as the potential lead. The talks eventually collapsed, the rights lapsed, and the film was never made.
There's a girl that does jobs for me from time to time, Tiger.
Yes. What about her? What?
Oh, nothing, I just...
Detail 4. Steven Spielberg once interviewed for a job on the production. Before Hogan's Heroes was a piece of his personal history, Steven Spielberg interviewed for a job on the show as a young man trying to break into the film industry. The story is true. Spielberg himself confirmed it and later depicted the episode in his 2022 autobiographical film, The Fabelmans, in which his stand-in character attempts to get a foot in the door of Hollywood through the Hogan's Heroes production. The scene in the film showed Spielberg's younger self sitting across from a producer, nervous and eager, trying to convince someone on a successful television show that he was worth hiring. He did not get the job. What makes the detail especially layered is that Michael Kahn, who became Spielberg's longtime film editor, beginning with Close Encounters of the Third Kind in 1977 and continuing through Raiders of the Lost Ark, Schindler's List, and many others, had worked as an editor on Hogan's Heroes during its production. When The Fabelmans was being made, Kahn told interviewers that he had no idea Spielberg had ever tried to get a job on the show. He had been working there the whole time and never knew the young director had come in for an interview. Two careers that would eventually define American cinema for decades had come within reaching distance of each other on the Hogan's Heroes set, and neither man knew it at the time.
Full of men, and they will lead us directly to the underground escape center.
Oh, Herr Kommandant.
Detail 3. Werner Klemperer reprised Klink, only once after the show ended, as a voice. After Hogan's Heroes ended in 1971, Klemperer was repeatedly asked to reprise the role of Colonel Klink. He declined nearly all such requests, protective of a character he had played for 6 years and unwilling to bring him back in context that felt trivial. He turned down an offer from Conan O'Brien, among others. The one exception was a 1993 episode of The Simpsons, The Last Temptation of Homer. In it, Homer is visited by a guardian angel, and the voice of that guardian angel was Klemperer as Klink. It was a cameo appearance, but an entirely vocal one. Klemperer provided the voice without appearing on screen. For a large number of viewers who had grown up well after the original run of Hogan's Heroes, it was their first encounter with the character.
Why not? I was dancing.
Who is? Corporal Langenshire?
Detail 2. Several cast members recorded an album of World War II songs. In 1968, while the show was still in active production, 4 of the cast members, Ivan Dixon, Robert Clary, Richard Dawson, and Larry Hovis, went into a recording studio and made an album together. It was titled Hogan's Heroes Sing the Best of World War II, and it included songs from the era as well as lyrics that had been written for the show's theme. Jerry Fielding, the theme's composer, contributed to the album. The album is a remarkable artifact. 4 actors in the middle of a wildly popular television series, stepping briefly into a recording studio to sing songs from the actual war their show was lampooning. Dixon, who played the communications expert Kinch, was African American. Clary, who played LeBeau, was a Holocaust survivor who had spent 31 months in Nazi camps. They were sitting around a microphone in a California studio, recording World War II songs for a novelty album in 1968. There is something about that detail that captures the particular strangeness of what Hogan's Heroes actually was.
It's the first one they taught us at cryptology, this was. I don't suppose they've used this code for all...
Detail 1. The show ran for 168 episodes, longer than the war it was set during. Hogan's Heroes premiered on CBS on September the 17th, 1965, and aired its final episode on April 4th, 1971. Over that span, it produced 168 episodes across 6 seasons. The show was set during World War II, specifically in the years when Germany was still a functioning military power, roughly 1942 to 1945. The American involvement in World War II, from the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941 to VJ Day in September 1945, lasted 3 years and 8 months. Hogan's Heroes ran for 5 years and 6 months. The show that depicted the war lasted nearly twice as long as the American participation in the war itself. And perhaps that is the detail that says the most about what Hogan's Heroes actually was. It was not really a war show. It was a character show built around a group of people who happened to be wearing uniforms. The war was the container. What was inside it? The wit, the camaraderie, the performances, the genuine history that the cast carried with them into every scene was something else entirely. For every one of those 168 episodes, Colonel Hogan won, Klink lost, Schultz saw nothing, and the Stalag 13 set somewhere in Culver City remained perpetually, stubbornly, improbably covered in snow. That is our look at 25 small details you missed in Hogan's Heroes, a show that looked on the surface like pure comedy, and turned out to have more genuine history buried inside it than almost anyone watching at home in 1965 ever realized. The performers who made it brought things to those roles that no script could have written. Some of them had lived through the events they were now parodying. All of them showed up every week and made it look easy. If this video brought something back or told you something new, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe. There is a lot more television history where this came from, and we would love to have you back for the next one.